For today's double review, it's a double roguelite review of games very reminiscent of that of Dead Cells, with Astral Ascent and Oblivion Override. Astral Ascent was in early access for several years after a successful Kickstarter and was released at the end of 2023. In this one, we are trapped in a giant space prison by an evil warlord that likes to go around destroy planets. Helping him or protecting him are the 12 Zodiacs, 12 very different bosses that you will encounter at least a few of them on each run. In order to break out, you will have to do what we always do in these games: get power, get beaten up a few times, and level up your persistent elements. The unique aspect of Astral Ascent is this is one of the few action roguelites we've played that also features full co-op play, which you're not going to be seeing in the footage here. But you can play through the entire campaign with a friend using the remote co-op feature. I do not believe this game has an actual online service for it. As for our gameplay, you'll choose from one of 4 characters. Each one comes with different abilities, as well as a quote-unquote signature move. This is kind of like their super ability. One character gets a counter move, another one can summon a drone, and so on. But the big kind of major aspect of combat and how you play through is the use of spells. Each character can equip up to 4 different spells, and my video is blocking kind of the spell interface in the bottom left at the moment. The spells themselves can either come as more like general or neutral, or character specific. And each spell will do all kinds of things and procs and special effects and all that good stuff. But they can be further modified using gambits. And you can attach gambits to skills. They'll have different rarities and different elemental types. If you attach the correct element to the right spell, it will gain bonus damage as well, but a lot of it will also come down to being able to add additional utility to your spells, such as giving you greater crit chance, letting the spell do elemental damage, even changing the elemental properties of a spell if you get the right gambits. Combat is very fast paced. You have access to a dodge, and this is important because enemies can get very over the top in terms of their attack patterns and combos. To the game's credit, it does a really good job of spelling out what the enemy attack is coming, what is kind of the pattern of it, and giving you some ample warning as to how to avoid it. And this is especially true when you get to the Zodiac fights. With the 12 Zodiacs in the game, you will only encounter up to 4 in a single run, at least at the start of when we played. Each Zodiac is a unique fight, complete with kind of a desperation phase, and you'll need to figure out how to deal with them using your own character. And a lot of this game in terms of build design over the course of the run is figuring out what spells you want to use, how they will affect or impact whatever auras. Auras are kind of like your passive artifacts. And then of course how you build your character based on their chosen abilities. This is important because another factor about combat is how mana is generated. Mana are the blue crystals you see below the health gauge in the upper left, and you only get mana back normally by hitting an enemy with your normal attack. This also prevents you from just mass spamming spells for the most part. But you'll need to figure out which spells to get in terms of their usage, as well as how much they will cost to use. And there is a lot going on in this game, and it becomes even more so with the persistent elements. And after a run, win, lose, or whatever, you will be able to make use of the persistent elements to power things up and unlock new features. This includes permanently improving the base stats of all your characters, new spells, new services and vendors that can show up during a run. There is a lot that is added to this, and all the more so with the game's progressive difficulty or ascension modes. The Destiny level, which you see in the upper right, is the kind of route to the game's quote-unquote true ending. Once you beat the game one time, you'll be able to add additional modifiers which will make things harder, and will also allow you to get access to the game's persistent resources and more a lot faster. And as you go up this, things will of course get nastier. Enemies will get new attack patterns, they'll gain more base stats, and more as you try to see what this game has in store. In terms of difficulty, I would put Astral Ascent on the challenging side. I wouldn't say this is as hard or as brutal as Dead Cells is when you get to kind of like the higher cell levels of its Ascension modes, but this one can certainly get challenging. The game certainly gives you enough ways to kind of overpower yourself if you're looking for it. And again, there's definitely a lot of interesting synergies and mechanics with the different auras, spells, characters, and all that great stuff. If I had any major issues with the game, the readability does kind of get into trouble when you get to some of the later and nastier enemies. This game can turn into bullet hell almost at a moment's notice during some of the later fights, especially some of the more challenging Zodiac battles. And you are going to have to make heavy use of your dodge to get around this. I do like how healing is kind of a rechargeable based on finding crystals, and there are ways of making that easier and more powerful over the run. And of course, I need to mention the fantastic aesthetics of this game. The art style for the different Zodiac introductions and just general cutscenes are phenomenal, and the music you've been hearing that I've been taking from the OST is fantastic as well. Goes all over the place in terms of some very light, easy music to vibe to you're about to be utterly destroyed by a lot of bullets. So with that said, Astral Ascent is an easy recommendation if you are fans of anything that has to do with action roguelite play, especially if you're looking for a co-op game as well. I'm going to keep doing the Destiny levels and just seeing how far I can keep ascending in this one. We now switch gears to Oblivion Override. In this, we play as a kind of virus program that is trying to stop a simulation that is keeping all robots kind of trapped within it. And as a normal virus, we're going to do some hacking. And by hacking, I mean lots of hacking and slashing through different procedurally generated areas, looking for power, upgrades, and more. Like our last game, Oblivion Override definitely follows with the Dead Cells approach to a heavy, persistent, and roguelite design, complete with unlocking new weapons, new features, and the kind of progressive difficulty we'll talk about in a few minutes. As part of the gameplay, you'll start with a frame, and you can unlock additional frames or classes as you play and complete quests. Every weapon in the game is a unique one-off, and there is a very huge variety of them. From a baseball bat that you can use to hit balls at people, to a wok that you can fling at them Captain American style to do flame damage, a quite literal lollipop chainsaw, and much more. Every weapon has a special attack, and every class or frame has a mecha skill that you can use throughout combat and recharges over time. Now, what kind of separates Oblivion from some of the other ones that we've played is the approach to leveling up or getting upgrades over a run. As you kill enemies, you'll gain kind of nanites, which act as the game's quote-unquote experience points. By spending them at any time, you can choose from one of 3 randomly chosen mutations. Each mutation belongs to a different proficiency. If you get multiple kind of upgrades of the same proficiency, you can level it up, which will unlock a unique passive benefit, such as being able to execute normal enemies, get shields back, gain additional resources, and more. And this becomes a major aspect of defining your run and your build, as you have a limit of the number of mutations you can have equipped at one time, and it is certainly not possible for you to max or even get multi-proficiency specs, at least at the basic level of this game. Combat is, as you can see by now, on the faster side. Your dodge/dash does grant you iframes, and a major component of the game in choosing what weapons to go with which frame is how you deal with elite and kind of the higher class enemies. You've seen so far that many enemies have kind of this red outline over them. The red outline is when an enemy has guard or super armor, and specific attacks and mech skills can break guard. You certainly can't do this on the different bosses, but this is how you can try and get around some of the more annoying enemies. And you'll need to make use of this if you want to stand a chance. As you get further in, enemies will be doing more damage. As an important point, you have no iframes on hit. So if an enemy hits you like a 3-hit combo, you are eating all 3 of those hits. The level design again follows in suit of that of Dead Cells. You'll go through 3 different biomes at the start. You'll unlock another one once you kind of get to the game's major challenge. Each biome is set up as different rooms stitched together, and you'll find additional quests and characters that you can complete objectives for to unlock more weapons, more features, and all that other great stuff. The persistent elements are certainly here. Again, besides unlocking the new frames and upgrading your characters, you'll unlock new weapons. You can unlock additional features that can appear in subsequent runs as well. And the game's progressive difficulty or ascension mode I really do like. As you go up the quote-unquote alert modes, the game will introduce new enemy variants as well as shovel up where enemies can go, on top of course raising enemy stats as well. But I like the introduction of new enemies. There are elite versions of normal enemies, there's elite enemies, and it certainly adds a lot to the game's replay factor. As for any problems with this one, it does kind of have that one similar aspect of Dead Cells, in that some of your choices and builds kind of become more self-determined as you go up the different difficulty settings. Because enemies become more and more damaging, having the proficiencies that grant you shields or ways of recovering health become more and more important, especially again as the amount of damage they do greatly increases. And it did feel like this is one of those games where you can quote-unquote solve it once you get good enough at it, but I still enjoyed what I saw in it. Very solid action roguelike. This one I would say is going to be on the harder side than Astral Ascent just because of the sheer number of enemies, enemy types, and attack patterns you're going to have to manage. But if you're looking for another challenging roguelite, this is another easy recommendation and definitely one worth checking out. With that said, we're going to wrap up this double review here. Both games were played with press keys provided by their developers, and let me talk about your games for a future stream, video, whatever. Please reach out and let me know what you think of these games down in the comments. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to do the YouTubing stuff people tell you to do. If you're interested in more of my thoughts on design, check out my books wherever they are sold. Visit our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games.